How the devil are we? I'm Matt, and we're looking at retro mysteries of the 90s. 90s for me, best decade ever. Music was great. I was in my teen years. Life just seemed so much better back then. The 80s were magical as well. Better than the shit show we've got these days. Anyway, let's have a look.
Now, let's get creepy. The United Kingdom, with its abandoned castles and ancient cemeteries, has been called the most haunted country in the world. But of all the spooky stories, it's a 30-year-old VHS tape that recently captured the world's attention.
I bet some people in the UK still watch VHS tapes. I know my dad would if he was given the option.
It's summer 1991 in Barby Place, Bradford, UK. 15-year-old Adam Mawson has been using a camcorder to record his house when no one's home, in an effort to document some strange recent happenings. And on one of the tapes, Adam finds something frightening. Nothing seems amiss until a shadowy figure slowly begins to emerge from the chair. Look closely. It eventually rises and moves about the room, passing behind the door frame before returning and seemingly disappearing through the wall. Moments later, a second figure appears from the right and follows closely behind the other into the wall.
I was scared to death because I thought, what the hell is that? And that's when I showed my parents it, and my mum said, oh yeah, I've seen that before.
That's what I like about ancient mysteries. Ancient. Christ, I'm old now, if I'm calling 90s ancient. Old mysteries is much harder to fake back then. Way harder to fake.
With her own eyes.
And to journalist Alexis Brooks, it sounds like a classic haunted house tale.
Barby Place ranks among one of the most...
What I would say, though, is he said, I'm filming some strange things going on. It'd be good to know what those strange things were, because he set that camera up specifically to look through sort of a hallway into another room where a chair was. Did he see the chair moving, which is why he put the camera there? Seems a convenient placement, if you know what I mean.
haunted places that I have ever seen. I mean, you're talking about disembodied voices, doors opening, closing on their own, and even what I would call a shadow person phenomenon.
Or as Casper Sight would say, shadow bastards.
Shadow people are described as dark silhouettes with human shapes and profiles. These shadowy creatures are sometimes interpreted as the presence of a spirit or other entity. Others believe these figures to be negative beings that can be repelled by various means, including invoking the name of Jesus.
I have seen and heard so many accounts of what we call the shadow person phenomenon.
Yeah, it seems the most prevalent phenomena out there when you're talking about the paranormal. I mean, I think I saw a shadow person once. Sorry to keep pausing this, but I'll just tell you quickly. I was in bed as a kid, and the doorway to the bedroom was open. The light was on. It was pretty light, and I remember being in bed, and I remember poking my head from under the covers, and there was a black figure stood there right at the side of the bed. And I closed my eyes, dove back under the covers, and when I looked again, it was gone. And I remember it to this day. It was freaky as hell. It really was.
Many reports of shadow people include harassing an individual in their bedroom. So I would dare say that in addition to the more conventional haunting, we have what I would call a shadow person phenomenon going on in that home.
A figure often associated with shadow people is the Hat Man, a famous urban legend who wears a dark coat, a hat, and is unusually tall. Sometimes the figure is thought to be the devil himself.
I'm a hat man, skibidi-bidi-bum. Yeah, I've seen quite a few. I think Wi-Fi's did a segment on the Hat Man. It seems like there's reports across the world of the shadow figure with the hat.
Adam's father still lives in the house on Barby Place and says the activity has died down since he found religion. But that only seems to confirm that perhaps something spiritual was going on. Our experts take a closer look. First, we head to forensic video analyst Michael Primo for an authenticity check of this digitized copy.
We're not able to identify it as an actual ghost through forensic testing. but it could be the product of when the video was processed between the time that it was produced on tape to this digital version as some sort of artifact that is concealed as the object travels by, but is a CGI less likely.
So this footage probably wasn't manipulated intentionally, but how about accidentally?
These shadowy figures don't appear to be something that was introduced into the recording based on the artifacts that are present throughout its movement. And because we see these shadowy figures over several seconds in multiple instances, it's more likely something that actually happened in the video images.
So this recording itself may not have been manipulated, but we are not ready to declare this a ghost.
Well, you can't declare anything a ghost, because there's no proof that ghosts exists. What you could say is a genuine mystery. But yeah, you can't say we're not ready to declare it a ghost when you don't know ghosts exist.
We turn to physicist Dr. Matthew Shadagis, who suspects something shady.
What we're seeing here is this dark figure or shadow seeming to pass into the left wall and disappear, which would favor the ghost explanation. However, if you look very carefully over these few frames, there is some pixel darkening on the left that would seem to indicate that the shadow goes over the wall as we'd expect for a normal shadow being cast by someone off camera. It does not fully explain all the subtle motions we see, such as when the shape rises out of the chair, but it's the most plausible Well,
to be fair, if the camera's there, like me, say if I'm the camera, behind me is a light source, and I'm between the light source and the camera, then, and I stand up, it's gonna cast a shadow where the camera's pointing towards. But the shadow seems to be solid. It doesn't. When I say solid, it means it's right. The location is right where the chair is, rather than being against the back wall. But I suppose it's that grainy that you can't really tell anyway, can you?
Ghost explanation that I can come up with.
Primo disagrees and doesn't see any evidence that the shadow was created by someone off camera.
If the shadow was produced by the operator that's standing behind the camera, we would expect to see more of that cast off on the regions surrounding the doorway. But it's not produced over here on the right side.
Yeah, because you'd have to have multiple light sources to. Otherwise, you're going to have like a really obvious shadow, really obvious.
Side of the image. These darker regions, being some sort of shadow is not really possible with the way that we don't see that information on the doorway.
So if we're ruling out shadows of someone off camera, could this truly be a ghost? Some say physics itself is all the proof you need of life after death, because the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. We bring that theory to Dr. Shadagis.
This is a misinterpretation of what conservation of energy means. The very notion of conservation of energy comes from energy changing form. And a great example of this energy exchange occurs after we have passed away and our body decomposes. Gases and other elements will feed the worms after we've died. Therefore, we cannot use an argument like conservation of energy from physics.
Worms, I won't be feeding the worms. Burn me. Absolutely. Just put me in a cardboard box, send me through. Burn me. And the music I want playing, burn baby, burn, Disco Inferno. Yeah, I will not be feeding any worms when I'm dead.
In order to prove or disprove life after death.
So, it seems current science still can't attest to the existence of ghosts. But as of now, we can't explain this video any other way. Our verdict? This video is a bona fide case of unexplained phenomena.
Thank you. I mean, if you said it's a ghost, I would have said, I'll give your head a wobble.
Over 30 years running. It's 1994 at the Nevada Test and Training Range. It's used for flight tests, aerial gunnery, even nuclear tests. Today, an Air Force tracking station in the desert is monitoring the airspace above the top secret site when its remote-controlled cameras capture something that has no business being there.
I don't know. We acquired this unknown object, aircraft some type. It seems to be hovering there.
Whoa, we got it.
These 12 minutes of video were captured by remote-controlled cameras from the Nellis Air Force Base. And what they show you is fascinating.
The video was shot with a camera that amplifies the light from the stars and the moon to make it appear almost as bright as day. You can see in the time code that it was 11:21 p.m. That's the moon causing the bright lens flare while the operators zoom in on the object.
It appears to be a craft of undefined shape and origin that's moving erratically in a pattern that wouldn't be explained by the aircraft technology available at the time.
Well. I suppose this is just a Chinese drone showing just what they're capable of.
The readout in the upper right of the frame measures the object's distance from the camera.
We'll call this a kill on its unknown aircraft. T1 control doesn't know what type of aircraft it is either.
The object moves slowly above the horizon and then soars upward.
This object doesn't appear to have any wings or rotor blades, and it appears to change shape in flight.
Yeah, it's moving fast. Did we stop it? Standby 13.
Now here's what takes the weird to that other level. Within the Nevada Test and Training Range is a high security area whose name has become synonymous with UFO theory, Area 51.
Area 51 is a military base. The military didn't actually acknowledge that it existed until the 2000s.
I think, if I heard correctly, or if I understand correctly, that when they were filming Independence Day, the US military refused to give them any assistance whatsoever as part of making that film, because they referenced Area 51 in that film. And I don't think it was public knowledge at that point.
To say. And many in the UFO community believe that it's a hotspot for testing on alien technology. So when it actually was confirmed to exist, it was a really big deal.
But here's the thing. If this was some top secret tech, domestic or alien, being flown out of Area 51, you'd think the operators would know something about what's going on. Instead, they sound completely confused, which suggests that whatever this is didn't have the clearance to be there.
Well, to be fair, if the operators were at the Air Force Base, Area 51 was being operated in secret by the CIA, so I don't think you would brief them to say we're going testing some aircraft. You probably want to test the aircraft against your own military's capabilities of spotting it, maybe.
So what are we really looking at? Let's hand this over to our experts.
And by experts we have...
The object moves erratically in the sky, which suggests it's not an aircraft that we knew about at the time, such as a helicopter or a jet. The way it's moving is almost the way a drone would move.
But is it also that the camera is moving? So the camera's moving around to make it look like it's got erratic maneuverability. But in fact, it's the actual camera doing most of the work.
But drones didn't exist when this was captured.
Well, we all know that. Like the F-117 was in operation for about a decade before anyone realised it even existed. So, in one respect or another, I'm sure drones existed. Maybe not to the level they are today, but to say that they didn't exist at the time, don't know if we could say that, to be honest.
So the object's movement rules out known aircraft, as does its odd shape. Let's zoom in. There's no sign of an engine or an exhaust trail.
That leads me to believe that what we're looking at here
To be fair though, you can't really tell from that video.
is powered potentially by cold gas thrusters. A technology that wasn't necessarily as well understood at the time, but it could be an early prototype for a modern drone.
Could it be that the tracking station picked up some kind of classified military project being researched in nearby Area 51?
Anytime you're doing really classified testing, you turn off your tracking cameras. So the fact that this was captured and recorded is very intriguing. All of that is inconsistent with what we'd expect with actual classified aerospace testing.
But Mick West takes a closer look. He doesn't think the object is moving much at all.
Mick West will say that it is a balloon before he'd acknowledge it being anything else.
Whenever you see it moving and you can see something like a hill in the background, you'll see they both move together. So all the motion that we have in this particular video is just the motion of the camera.
Yeah, he's right. I think he's right on this one.
It's not really moving very rapidly in the scene, and it's not really turning or making any very abrupt moves. It's just kind of gently seeming to drift along and gently rotate.
Mark D'Antonio sees it the same way.
All the fast movements you see here are the camera itself moving to re-engage with the object and to see it. But it's not the object moving quickly. If you study the sky background and if you look at what is going on, you'll notice that the camera's doing all the moving.
And that leads...
It is moving from left to right, but I don't think it's doing hypersonic speeds or 90-degree turns or any of the 5 observables. So yeah, it's not transmedium.
Both D'Antonio
It's black, which indicates that it's hot.
and West to a very earthly explanation.
It looks like a bunch of balloons,
Well done, Mick West.
which is, an odd thing that you might not expect to see on a military training range, but there are small towns nearby. Someone could have just had a party and some balloons got loose, or it could have been something that they were experimenting with.
There have been balloon targets used before.
If you're gonna, it could be anything. It could be a flock of birds. It could be somebody's bedsheet that is blown away in the wind. You can't just say it could be this. What you've got to do is say, we don't know. Like, I've not proven one way or the other what it is. It's not a UFO, but it's also not balloons because I can't prove it's balloons. So what do you come back with? And to be fair, I said it's not a UFO, but it is. If you don't know what it is, it's a UFO. UFO.
Maybe this is what we're seeing here. But the folks on the base, they certainly weren't expecting this.
This is unfortunately a case where we may never know what this object actually was, because this is the type of thing that the military either forgets about or they don't tell you about.
To be fair though, I can't imagine that highly trained people would just look at a bunch of balloons and go, oh, what the hell is this thing? Yeah, what's it doing there? There must be more to it, otherwise they'd just go, yeah, there's something flying. It's probably a bunch of balloons. Nothing to see here.
So based on that further observation of the object's motion and shape, we're going to say that this was some kind of balloon that meandered in.
You can't prove that though. I hate that. You can't make a verdict and say it's a balloon because it could possibly be a balloon. It could also then possibly be an alien spacecraft, if you use that logic.
To the high security airspace. But this incident was not mentioned in the government's recent UFO report. So what the Pentagon thinks of this remains a mystery. For more than 30 years, computer science professor Erling Strand has been traveling the Hessdalen Valley in his native Norway, spending countless hours investigating a mystery that no one can explain. It's a phenomenon so rare that not many have ever captured it on film. But when it happens, Erling's camera and tripod have been there to record these eerie images. One of Erling's videos, taken on December 4th, 1999, shows a pulsating, flickering light that appears above the horizon. Another video shows...
Is that it? Just a light on the horizon? Plane, maybe?
...shows what appears to be a single mysterious pulsating light. When we zoom in, the shape, size, and intensity seem to be fluctuating as these lights travel high above the mountains.
There was no natural thing which could make these lights. I found that very little scientific information existed.
Close-up photographs reveal what appears to be an amorphous, gas-like substance. But what are they? The lights have been observed since the 1930s, but investigative journalist MJ
Ball lightning.
Naya says it was the period between December 1981 to mid-1984 when the scientific world really took notice.
What makes Hessdalen very interesting is we don't know if this is some sort of a naturally occurring phenomena. We don't know if this is a man-made phenomena. And we also don't know if this could have some sort of otherworldly answer.
In short, we do not know what it is.
While sightings of the lights are not as frequent as they once were, this has not stopped ufologists from believing that the lights are signs of extraterrestrial activity.
Some people believe that due to mineral deposits or the location of a specific mountain or valley, that UFOs are drawn to it, or that valleys and mountains play host to sort of underground bases for UFO pilots.
With absolutely no basis in reality and no evidence to back it up.
Researchers have recently come up with a more earthly explanation. The unusual lights may be caused by a natural battery buried deep underground, created by metallic minerals reacting with sulfur in the river running between them.
The area itself is very rich in minerals. For a very long time, mining operations have existed in the area, predominantly for minerals like copper and zinc, and these lights could be somehow connected to the mining operations that occur in the valley.
Researchers
are
so determined to figure out this phenomenon that in 1998, a permanent station called the Blue Box began monitoring the valley with a magnetometer, 2 black and white cameras, and 1 color camera. Clearly something strange is going on there. But what? We asked our experts to weigh in.
Who's paying for that then? Is that a government thing or is that a private thing?
Physics professor Matthew Shadaga says that since teams of scientists have been studying this phenomenon for decades, they've had plenty of time to eliminate several of the more mundane explanations.
We've already ruled out car, airplane, helicopter, because those objects don't fit the description of these lights, which have different behaviors, blinking on and off, changing shape, changing color.
While Shadaga says that the natural battery theory makes sense, it's still just a theory.
The natural minerals in the area may develop positive and negative charges naturally, like in your everyday battery. So if you have a strong enough electric field, you might end up with what look like lights in the sky.
Yeah, but then why do you not see these constantly over power stations?
Downside of the natural battery theory is these minerals are not necessarily next to each other. They're separated by the river in the area.
Astronomer and video effects designer Mark D'Antonio says another leading theory is that the lights are literally generated by the Earth.
The theory is that the lights are generated by some type of electrical energy coupled with some magnetic influences that ends up becoming visible in the air as naturally caused lights. In the same way that you scruff your feet on a carpet and touch something metal and you see a little spark between your finger and that metal thing, that might be able to occur on a larger scale. But I think that we're lacking information to say definitively what they are.
Yeah, I mean, you'd see that in more locations then, wouldn't you? I am baking, by the way. It's roasting right now.
Exactly what we're seeing here. But it is a rather compelling video nonetheless.
Our verdict? We're calling this an unexplained phenomenon. While the theory that the geology of Norway is causing the Hessdalen lights is compelling, it is still only a theory. And it begets the question, why don't we see this battery effect around other similar geological areas? One thing is certain, more research is needed. And if you want to head to Norway to do it, they'll leave the lights on for you. It began in 1991 when a deep-water hydrophone like this first detected a sound emanating from 5,000 miles away, someplace in the Pacific Ocean, roughly halfway between Australia and...
It's the bloop. The bloop. A weird sound that they could not identify.
South America. Let's listen to it again. The whoop whoop sound ascends at the end. That's why it's known as the Upsweep. Now, the ocean is a noisy place. There's man-made machines, geological events like volcanoes and glaciers, and the sea life is much noisier than previously believed.
Yeah, I think, was there not a modern study done on this where they reckon it was actually tectonic activity causing it? I'm sure that was the case.
So much left to be discovered down there. Journalist Alexis Brooks suggests the upsweep may be caused by some unknown sea beast.
There are many creatures that roam the sea that people felt were, in fact, myth until they were actually discovered. For instance, the giant squid. It is now known that it exists.
One thing is certain, the source of the upsweep has to be massive. So let's consider this candidate, the massive prehistoric shark known as the megalodon.
Nope. I can't imagine that anyone's ever thought that the megalodon would make that kind of noise. It's too busy fighting Jason Statham anyway.
It's been established that the megalodon actually did exist, albeit 2.5 million years ago, with estimates of its length being in excess of 60 feet and weight upwards of 50 tons. However, there are people who feel that the megalodon still exists.
Yeah, there's no evidence though, is there? I mean, people could feel like it still exists because the oceans are massive. And to be fair, I don't think we've discovered half the things that are in the oceans, but needs evidence.
Could this recent photo be proof the megalodon is still alive? It shows a huge mako shark found by a fisherman off the coast of Australia, bitten in half.
You have to take a deep breath and say, what on God's green earth severed the shark? How big could that have been?
I mean, is it severed or is it... I mean, it could be, to be fair. I mean, are orcas big enough to do that?
So the famous megalodon is one interesting potential source of the upsweep, but there are plenty of other theories about that strange sound. For answers, we turn first to our expert on ocean life. Marine biologist Dr. Shay Conger starts by tackling the megalodon theory.
It's unlikely that megalodons are still in our oceans because of the fact that shark teeth are continually shed through the animal's life. There's never been a current specimen of a megalodon tooth that's ever been found.
And as for that chewed up mako shark,
If this were attacked by a megalodon, it likely could have been swallowed completely whole. Instead, what you see are several very large semicircular bite marks, including some teeth rakes. What this tells me is that this animal suffered a number of bite wounds.
likely during a feeding frenzy by other sharks. But something is making that sound, and if it's not the megalodon, what is it?
It was like that noise you used to do in the 90s when you were at a nightclub. Ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh.
Audio expert Dr. Ben Gottesman is struck by the sound's intensity, focusing on the stunning fact that it was first detected at a distance of 5,000 miles.
That's what makes me think it's some very large, very intense seismic sound.
So let's listen to the sound of an underwater volcano. Note that it trails off at the end. Now the upsweep. Again, the signature ascension. This doesn't match anything seismic. So what about a man-made source, like the machinery used for offshore oil drilling?
Pile drivers or different machines in the ocean have a more mechanically spaced, more stereotypical, impulsive sound. That's not what we see here.
Didn't the US military or DARPA, somebody like that, didn't they have some sort of underwater experiment going with sonar where it released like a really, really high frequency pulse so that they could detect vessels underwater for miles? I need to look into these things.
Because the upsweep varies, Conger says it's likely the sound was made by an animal, but with a catch.
The upsweep is a sound that we have as yet attributed to any species of marine mammal. The upsweep doesn't currently match any of these profiles.
Humpback whale sounds can travel thousands of miles, just like the upsweep. But again, none match its acoustic profile. So you see why it's remained a mystery for so long. Every possible explanation doesn't quite fit. But we agree with Dr. Conger. Our verdict? A very large, unidentified marine mammal.
I'm happy with that verdict. Very large, unidentified marine mammal. Whatever that is, I would not want to come across it if that's the case. I'm still not ruling out though underwater sonar or experimentation. Maybe it's what that 4chan guy said, a large underwater UFO manufacturing base that moves around the oceans and basically attacks anything that comes within a certain amount of distance from it. Yeah, I mean, go and check that out on Reddit. What a minefield that was. Now, these are some good mysteries. I think there's some more coming up on the 90s mystery series, so yeah, we'll get into it. You take care and have a good one.